Welcome back to the PhoneGap Essentials course on NetTuts Plus Premium. In the last lesson, we set up our development environment for iOS using Xcode. Today we will set up our environment for Android using a completely different set of tools. Once again, you'll find all the information you need on the Getting Starting Guide for Android in the PhoneGap docs. First, let's check out our minimum system requirements for development. PhoneGap links us to the Android developer page, which has all the information we need. As you can see, Android development is much more open, and you can use just about any operating system you wish. Whereas iOS development uses Xcode for its IDE, we'll be using Eclipse, which is used to create Java applications. We'll need Eclipse JDT plugin, which is included in most packages, and the Java Development Kit version 6. We'll also need Android Development Tools plugin. Android version support is a lot more complex than iOS version support. As you can see, Cordova currently supports Android 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 3 and 4. However, version 2.1 will be depreciated in May 2013, along with Android Honeycomb, or version 3. Cordova states that they will cease supporting different versions of Android once distribution falls below 5%. As you can see, in version 2.1, Eclair is already at 2.4%, so it's being dropped. The download package on developer.android.com actually includes everything we need to get started. This bundle includes Eclipse plus the ADT plugin, which is the Android Developer Tools. It includes Android Platform Tools, the latest Android platform, and the latest Android system image for the emulator. This is equivalent to the iOS simulator that you find in Xcode. After you agree to the terms and conditions, you can begin downloading the package. Once you have your package, unzip it and let's take a look inside. We have two folders, Eclipse. This includes our development environment, our IDE, and is equivalent to Xcode, but for Java and Android. This particular version has been customized specifically for Android development. You can choose to use this version of Eclipse, or download Eclipse Classic 4.2.1 from eclipse.org. I already have Eclipse installed, so I'm actually going to rename this Eclipse Android and have them both installed just to see if there are any differences between them. The first time we open up Eclipse, it will ask us to define a workspace to work within. This is where all of the Eclipse projects will be stored. I could use the same folder as my iOS development folder, but I'm going to make a separate one called Projects Android. So let's open up the Android customized Eclipse. Define our workspace. Here we are being asked to define our Android SDK. Back in our bundled zip file, I'm going to copy the SDK folder and drop it into my SDKs folder in my documents. I'll also change the name to something more specific. Back in Eclipse, I can now choose the SDK, and as you can see, if I hit apply, I can now choose Android 4.2 as my SDK. I'm going to select to also install Android 2.2, a version which is supported by most telephones. Now I'm being asked to install some different packages. If you look carefully, they're all required. So I'm going to click Accept All and Install. I should point out that the Getting Started guide for Android on PhoneGap seems a little bit out of date. For a start, it recommends downloading Eclipse Classic, the Android SDK, and then the ADT plugin. But as we can see, on the Android developer page, they have already bundled all three of these together in one download. Obviously, you can set up your development environment in many different ways, but for a beginner to this sort of thing, it can be quite confusing. For those of you who already develop with Eclipse, or would like to use another IDE, you can still use the same download package that you got from Android, but instead all you'll need is the SDK folder. This is then added to your Eclipse installation in the same way we did before, and you would also need to install the ADT plugin separately. This is a relatively simple process. Open up Eclipse, go to Help, Install New Software, and click Add in the top right corner. Enter ADT plugin for the name, and for the location, use the link on the web page. Tick the checkbox next to Developer Tools and click Next. In this window we see a list of tools to be downloaded. You then just have to click on Finish and accept the terms and conditions. But for now, we'll be working with the Android bundled version, which already has this plugin installed. Okay, so we've successfully installed all of the different Android operating system packages and developer tools. Now we need to download the latest copy of Cordova and extract its contents. Download Cordova 2.3.0-source zip. Inside the zip folder you'll find this folder here, which I've already downloaded from our previous setup of the iOS installation. We can unzip the Cordova-Android zip file to get access to the Cordova Android SDK. Next we need to set up our path environment variable. Path is an environment variable for the whole OS, specifying a set of directories where executable commands and programs are located. To do this, we need to open up the terminal. The Getting Started guide gives us a command to open up the file in our default text editor. We need to add the following line into this text file. But instead of this path here, we'll need to enter our own path to the Platform Tools and to the Tools folder in our Android SDK folder. If we navigate to our Android SDK, we can see these two folders here, Platform Tools and Tools. These are the two paths we'll need to add to the file. And here it is in its entirety. Export path, then the path to my Platform Tools, colon, and the path to my Tools folder. We can then save the file and quit the text editor. We now need to execute our .bash profile file to update the path. I can copy and paste this command and execute it in the terminal. Now every time I open the terminal, the path will include the Android SDK tools. Now while I can't do the entire tutorial a second time for Windows, it is much the same apart from changing your path variable. Using VirtualBox, I'm going to show you how you would do it for Windows. We need to right-click on my computer and go down to Properties. If we click on the Advanced tab, down the bottom we'll find an Environment Variables button. In the System Variables section, we'll select the Path variable. Next we need to copy this line into the Path field, but obviously you'll have to change these paths to the relevant paths on your computer. We simply add them onto the end. Make sure that you don't overwrite, but you add them to the end, and press OK. Finally, we can set up a new project. If you didn't catch the iOS development environment tutorial, we create new projects with the command line tool called Create. To create a project, you need a project folder path, which is your new Cordova Android project, a package name, which is a reverse domain name, and a project name, which is just the name of your app. But it cannot contain spaces. To navigate our terminal to the correct folder to execute the create command, we can navigate to our Cordova Android folder and drag the bin file onto the terminal in the dock. As you can see, this terminal window is in the bin folder. So let's create our new project. Just to make sure I don't get confused with my other projects, I've called this one Hello World Android. It's in the Documents/Projects Android folder. Our reverse domain name is com.tutsplus.helloworldandroid, and our project name is Hello World Android. So let's execute that. Okay, I ran into a little error there. It says that it can't find the Cordova 2.3.0 JS file. It says that no such file or directory exists. This is because I forgot to unzip one of the other folders required for building Android apps. I unzipped the Cordova Android folder, but I also needed to unzip the Cordova JS folder. Having done that, If I try to build again, the build is successful. So we can find that in our documents, under Projects Android, Hello World Android, we find our new Android project folder. We can now open up this new folder, creating a new project in Eclipse. I can go to File, New, Project. I can now select from Android an Android project from existing code. This is important because we do not need Eclipse to create our project folders for us. It has already been done by Cordova. Select your root directory, which in our case is Hello World Android, and click Finish. If you get an invalid project description, a simple fix I found is to drag your project folder outside of your workspace folder and import it from there. So back inside Eclipse, we can select New Project, Android project from existing code. We browse to our desktop where we've left the Hello World code. And this time we check the box Copy Projects into Workspace. This time, we've copied our project into our workspace with no errors. As you can see, when we import a project and open it up, there are many different folders and files. Of most interest to us is the Assets folder, which contains the www folder. Inside here is all the CSS, JavaScript and HTML needed to build our app. Now let's try and export our project to the simulator. If I right-click on Hello World, I can go down to Run As, Android Application. The first thing it says is that there are no compatible targets. We have not yet created an Android virtual device, or the equivalent of the iOS simulator. We're going to have to add a new one. Android simulators are a bit more complex than the iOS simulator, because there are so many different versions of Android and so many different devices. If we open up the Manager, we can create a new device. Let's try and create a replica of a Galaxy S2. From the Device drop-down menu, I'm going to select a 4-inch 480 by 800 screen device. We'll leave it at Android 2.2, as this makes up a great portion of Android users, and we can actually set the back camera to use the computer's webcam. If we hit refresh back in our selection screen, we can select Galaxy S2 from here. As you can see, our simulator is already launching. This can take quite a while the first time, so I suggest that while you're developing, to keep your simulator open. Every time you rebuild your project, it should update in the Android simulator. As you can see, we've successfully launched our app in the Android simulator. The Device is Ready message means that PhoneGap is correctly interfacing with the Java APIs of Android. Let's just test it out for a second. Right-click on the index file and open with the text editor. You may notice that there is no code coloring for this HTML. This can be resolved with plugins and add-ons for Eclipse. For now, let's just change this message from Device is Ready to Device is Ready for Tuts Plus. We'll save that and we'll relaunch. You can also launch by pressing the little play button up here. As you can see, the application is being reloaded and the update has taken effect. Finally, let's see if we can run this application directly on my device. In your Android phone, make sure you go to the Settings, Developer Options and set USB debugging to True. Attach it to the computer with a USB cable. Now, as before, we can click on Run As, Android Application. We now have a choice between launching to the simulator or launching directly to the telephone. This was actually a lot speedier than using the simulator. Okay, that's all for now. Have fun experimenting and check back in for Lesson 4, where we will explore cloud building offered by Adobe, which will do all the heavy lifting in exporting for multiple platforms. Ciao!